I am now live, and oh my goodness. Gotta fix that. Right, fix the hair. I really should have shaved. Hey Sahil, what's up? It's now that I'm on camera that I'm realizing that I should have shaved. But I ran out of shaving cream today. So that's why I look like a dressed up hobo, pretty much. So now I just gotta wait for May. Oh, you're too kind, you're too kind. Ah, there's May. Hi May, how are you doing? Hope you're ready to have this conversation. I've just accepted your request. Just waiting. Hi, there you are. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for asking. So, we're gonna get started. We'll hopefully more and more people will join as the conversation goes along. But
Absolutely.
yeah, I'm so excited to talk to you because out of all the people that we've spoken to on this show, I think you might just be the first one that has had such a established career in radio,
Yeah.
actually. And actually wanted to ask. This is like kind of like a funny question. It's not very related to the conversation, but I wanted to ask. You wouldn't happen to be a fan of Frasier by any chance, would you?
Why, yes, but I haven't seen it in a really long time. I used to be quite obsessed with it. Like, I loved it. I thought it was such a good show. And yeah, I would say for sure. So, yes.
It is my favorite sitcom ever, and it's actually one of the most successful sitcoms in terms of awards. It was actually the most successful TV show in terms of awards as well. Like I think 37 Emmys or something, and
More than
it's
Seinfeld and more than like,
more more than I think Seinfeld and Friends put together, maybe.
oh my God, I didn't realize that at all. That's
And the
amazing. Man.
and the only show that has more Emmys than it is Game of Thrones. That's it.
What? You can't compare. I mean, that's not even the same. But by the way, I don't know if you heard, was there like I could be absolutely wrong here. Didn't like Frasier's dad like pass away like 2 years ago or a year or
Yes,
so ago? Yeah, right? I mean the
yes,
guy
and
who
like
acted as
20.
Frasier's dad. Yeah, yeah.
Yes. John Mahoney. So he did pass away, and actually, so I was actually in Chicago when he passed away in Chicago. So it was kind of like more.
Are
It
you
hit a little closer to
serious?
home. So,
Oh my
but yeah,
gosh.
and they're actually planning to bring the show back in some form. They're trying to revive it. So I don't know what they're
How?
gonna do. I have no idea, but they're planning to do the same with like Futurama. So if they can do that, why not do it with
I
Frasier as
know,
well?
but I mean, you have to have the old character. I mean, is Kelsey Grammer still going to be there? Is like, I
Yes.
don't know. Like, they have to be though. I can't have Frasier without Frasier.
Absolutely, yeah. Kelsey Grammer has always said that he's happy to come back, and now that his record for the longest running live action character has been taken away from him, I'm sure he wants to come back and reclaim the award for now.
Fair enough. I think so too.
Yeah. But all right, so that's all our Frasier talk. So let's get into the conversation. So obviously, because we're talking so much about Frasier, it's because you have such a great career in radio. And I remember I was doing some research for this conversation, and I came across one interview that you had done where you kind of talked about how there was this gap between what radio was like here in India and what it was like in the UK, where you went to college and everything. So, and you said that the UK radio was obviously ahead of Indian radio. So I was just wondering, do you feel that Indian radio has caught up to the kind of radio that you're familiar with from the UK?
Well, I mean, firstly, no, because one of the most basic issues with radio in India is that private commercial radio stations can't broadcast news. So, you can't, like a Mirchi can't do a news update on the hour every hour as you would like an AIR. So that's literally like written in stone in like legally they can't do it. So that's already like that's always going to be like a tough thing that like I actually started out as a radio journalist. So for me, it was like a complete loss. Like, you know, when I came here and I was like, oh, I can be a radio journalist. And I was like, well, no, you can't. So, yeah, so it was really like, I think that was the first thing that surprised me because I thought by the time I come back to India, something must have changed. But it didn't, and it still hasn't. And you still can't broadcast news on private commercial radio stations. So that's one big issue. Also, another, I guess, issue with radio, and I think that is the huge difference, is that radio in general is quite expensive, but even the licensing system, you know, of how you get a radio license, it's really expensive. So you have to basically be able to be a very large company with very deep. Most of the radio stations in India, the private commercial radio stations, I'm not talking about AIR, are either big media conglomerates or they're owned by like telecom companies. So yeah, so which is why like, and again, because it's so expensive to run a radio station, there are so few. So in a city like Bombay, which has about 26 million people, there are like 9 stations or something. So, and it's either Bollywood or English. Like there's no genre-based radio. Like you can't have like an Indian folk station or something in Rajasthan. Like none of that exists. Or like a rock station in Bangalore. Like it's that kind of stuff doesn't really exist. So yeah, radio in India is pretty limiting. I'm talking about FM, AM, that kind of thing. I'm not talking about online stations because that's like a whole different other thing. Or community radio
Absolutely.
stations. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so you said that, you know, these sort of private stations, private commercial stations, are not allowed to broadcast news. And is that like because of the government, or is that because of they themselves have imposed that limitation? Like, what is the plan on, what is the kind of situation on that?
I mean, I have to be honest, I don't know the real legalities around it, but I do know that this was a restriction that was put in place round about like when the British were here because they felt
Oh,
like,
wow.
but this kind of existed kind of everywhere where generally radio was considered a medium that was accessible to everyone. So a lot of trust that's there with radio was that if you said something on the radio and whether it was true, it's the whole War of the Worlds thing, right? It's like when you
Right.
hear it and there's like, oh my God. So the issue is that there was like a level of trust, which is why like All India Radio and the government run radio stations are the only ones that can do news. So if you are a private commercial radio station, you're not allowed to do news because there's a level of trust behind it. Private commercial radio stations have been fighting this for over like decades. So
Wow.
and to no avail. So it is a government thing. So I don't really do much about it till it changes. So yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, now with the technology, I feel like the conversation has kind of become moot at this point with podcasting taking off in the way that it has. People, and with, of course, the internet being proliferated, people can now sort of look to other avenues instead of just waiting for radio to catch up with the times, I guess.
Yeah.
But so after you were done in the UK and you worked in radio there, you came back to India, and the first place where you worked was actually in Chennai, and you spent about a year there. So could you talk a little bit about that experience and what kind of motivated you to move from Chennai to Mumbai?
Well, I moved to Chennai because I got a job opportunity there. Otherwise, like Bombay was always my base. No matter where I was in the world, like I always came back to Bombay. But I moved to Chennai the moment I came back from the UK because there was a job there and they needed a creative manager for a radio station, an English radio station there, which is
Hmm.
why I ended up in Chennai. Also, the radio station, my cousin was the head of production there. So it was kind of like, oh, I've got family around, which was nice because that kind of grounds you a little bit and you don't feel like you're kind of thrown in the deep end. So I
Right.
had about a year there. I really enjoyed it. I used to do like a little indie music show on the weekends, and it was quite fun.
Oh,
And
nice.
plus, I have a lot of family in Chennai, so it wasn't like a difficult sort of transition for me to go from the UK to Chennai. But I really enjoyed it, and it was the only English radio station in Chennai. And yeah, and I remember I had like the best time. The morning show host was this whirlwind of a human being called Sanobar, who I really enjoyed working with, and I think her and I got along really well. So it's really nice to like have also people that you gel with who are game for doing really fun things on the radio. I remember when Sano was getting married, she basically the morning show was up for grabs, and there was me and there was this other girl called Jane, and the two of us volunteered to do the morning show, which by the way is horrifying because you had to get up at like 5 a.m. in the morning and get to the station by 6 a.m.
Wow.
to broadcast at like 7. So it's like, well, doing the morning show is really bugging. But it's also like prime time. So we decided to have just absolute fun on the radio. And I remember because Jane used to be part of the sales team, she was like, we decided to co-host this. She had all these like, these prizes and these hampers. And so she was like, let's do some contests and like give stuff away. And then I thought of this. She was like, can you think of a game? Because I was a creative manager and I was like, oh, let me think of a game. And then I thought of this game where I just asked everyone, I was like, which hand is the hamper in? Is it in Jane's left hand or her right hand? And because it's audio and you can't tell, she was like, how can we ask that question? I was like, well, it's a 50-50 chance that someone will get it. It's equally as like, pulling your name out of a hat. And
Right.
then so we got obviously arbitrary answers, but then we also had people like we had this doctor who talked about, well, if she's right-handed, there's this auto spinal reflex where if you're right-handed, you pick up things with your right hand rather than your left hand. And then there's like it was like really amazing, like the kind of answers that we got. So I felt like I had a lot of fun in Chennai because there was some level of creative freedom that we had there at that time. So yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed Chennai, but then I also felt like they reached a point where you feel like your journey in a place kind of ends. And you're like, I think
Hmm.
I'm done now. And
Yeah.
I wanted to move on. And I got a job, not a radio job, but I got a job with an online alternative culture portal called N87.in. And I used to basically write, I was a sub editor. So we used to write about music and all kinds of like really interesting things that were sort of taking place in India at the time. So I got a job with them, and then I left Chennai and I moved back to Bombay again. So that's the
Nice.
reason why I moved.
And we'll get to your time in Mumbai really quickly, but I do want to ask one thing because I myself, I moved back from the States back in 2019. And
Mm.
obviously, when I came back, a lot of the things that I enjoyed in the US, things like Netflix and such, had already come to India by that time. But obviously, when
Mm.
you moved back from the UK to Chennai, there were a lot of things that still had to make their way over to our shores. So I just
True.
wanted to ask,
But
when you
Netflix,
moved back,
I came back in 2010. That Blockbuster was still like a
still
thing,
a
and
thing,
like,
yes.
yeah, and Netflix didn't really exist at that time. So,
At that time, no. So that's actually what I wanted to ask. When you came back, obviously there were a lot of things that were there in the US or the UK that weren't there here. Now, obviously, a lot of things have come over. What did you miss the most after moving back to Chennai? What did you miss the most from the UK?
honestly, my friends. I mean,
Ah,
it's not anything in particular. Like, it's not like a technology thing or like a food thing or something, but definitely my friends, because I did want to stay on there. It was like a really difficult time because I graduated when pretty much the recession was happening, and it was really hard to
right.
get a job in media at that time. I mean, I was working for um, a, a community radio station. I was working as a news editor at that time, and I really did enjoy it, but it was really hard I applied for jobs like crazy, and I'm not the only one. I know so many friends of mine who had been working really hard to find a job there and ended up having to come back. And I did get a chance to work there for 2 years after I graduated. So I at least had some time where I worked there, but I couldn't stay there long enough. And pretty much when the elections happened and the Tories won, I was like, oh, it's time for me to leave. The Conservatives have won. I must go. Onward, tally ho to my home. So like literally I realized that I would be so hard for me to get a visa at that time. So then I just decided that I would just come back. And if I got an opportunity to come back to the UK, I would. But till then, I'm going to go and muck in like India and try to find myself a job there. So that's pretty much what I genuinely missed. Is my old, because I all of my friends, I mean, that I have now is all through work or my old boarding school buddies, because I did my entire college years in the UK, so that all of them were there. So, and yeah, now married and having children and whatever, but I definitely miss them. I think that's the thing that I miss the most in the UK.
And I so feel you on the political thing, because I came back from in 2019, in August of 2019, and I moved back because I was like, okay, here we go. Trump's going to win another 4 years, and
Yeah.
I am not ready for this. And in fact, the thing that kind of took me over the edge was that my favorite secondhand video store that I would go to get secondhand movies and things, they suddenly told me that if I wanted to use my ID, my passport suddenly was not good enough all of a sudden. And I was just like, okay, well, this is it.
That's
I'm
not
done here. And then
Yeah,
I
we're
moved
like,
back,
motherland,
and
here I come.
exactly. And then I moved back, and then the elections happened here, and I was like, well,
You're like, what's the point? Is this one
exactly.
like soup into another hot soup? God damn it. Yeah.
Yeah, except this soup is a bit spicier.
Yeah, exactly.
So you talked about your when you moved to Mumbai, you got a job with NH7, and you were doing writing work, and obviously you've done a lot of producing work as well and editing work.
Yeah.
Between writing and producing, which one would you say you prefer more between the two?
You mean producing in the sense like producing a podcast or producing a radio show like that? Or hosting or
I'm talking producing a radio show and the writing that goes into a radio show.
oh my God. I have to be very honest, I'm not a good writer. Like I'm an okay writer. I did it because it was a great in for me because I didn't spend my college years here. I never saw cool Indian college bands. So there was an entire part of my college that so many people my age have experienced that I didn't, like mosh pits and, Raspberry Rhino and all these kind of places that I just never experienced. And so for me, I felt like I got to really be in touch with some amazingly cool things that were taking place in a very indie alternative culture space in India. And so I really enjoyed that. But I don't think I was a great writer. I think I was like, I don't think I was terrible. I was like medium. Like I wasn't like really bad, but I wasn't really good. I was okay. There were other people in our team that were way better writers than I was. And I write because I do enjoy writing. It's not like I don't enjoy it. It's like I'm not a
Right.
great writer. But the other thing was that I'm a much better interviewer. Like for me, that was like the real skill that I have. That's the thing that I really enjoy. And so I think like being a radio producer or a radio host, that was the thing that I really enjoyed. I like talking to people. I like talking about things. And so I think for me, like my real strong suit is being able to do interviews. So that was the stuff that I really liked doing even when I was working at N87 Saturn. And I still really do enjoy doing, whether I'm on the radio, whether I'm on a podcast. So that's the stuff that I like, talking basically.
Nice. Yeah, birds of a feather here because I enjoy the sound of my own voice a little bit too.
I know the sound of my voice, but I think it's conversation because I feel like
Yeah.
when you're having a conversation with someone, one is that you get to learn so much more from their experience or their expertise. And the other is just it's in like it's fun to get to know someone else's story. I think that's also something that I really like. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. And speaking of learning and music and getting knowledge from someone else's expertise, so unlike you, I moved overseas when I was 12, so I didn't have the whole Indian high school experience or the Indian college experience. And by the time I moved back, I was pretty much I didn't know anybody here, and so I had to really kind of build a life up from scratch, and that also translated into music. Because when I was in Chicago, there were festivals like Riot Fest or Lollapalooza or all these kind of festivals. Here, I was trying to get a handle on the scene here, and I wanted to learn about the music that is aside from Bollywood. And the only kind of reference point that I had was Gully Boy. That was it. I knew there was a rap scene here, and that was it. So
So
here's
you
my
still
question
found
to
out
you.
about the indie scene through Bollywood.
Yes, that is kind of tragic, but yes.
It's
But
really tragic.
but here's my question. Top five indie artists in India.
I'm not doing that. That's like asking you like which were your favorite top five Frasier episodes or something. But it is I would say I am not gonna give you my top five favorite artists because I feel like with music, especially with me, it's not a one is better than the other. For me, it's kind of
Sure.
like I feel like a lot of it's dependent on mood and where I'm at, and how I'm feeling. But I can tell you like five really cool artists that you should listen to.
Please. Please.
One is um, an artist that I recently interviewed called Temsu Clover, who comes from Dimapur in Nagaland. And she
Okay.
is a brilliant artist. She released, I think she's only released a couple of singles, but I featured her on the show and she was so great. So I'd highly recommend Temsu. The
Okay.
other is a band that I've just got in, whose episode I have not released yet, but I'm excited to release, is again another Nagaland band called Trance Effect. They are
Trance Effect.
so good. And since we're
Wow.
talking about Chennai, I interviewed a musician called Josh Fernandez, but his artist name is J Babe, and he just featured on my show and he did a completely acoustic set even though he's like he has a lot of electronic elements in his music. He did a full acoustic set, which is very kind of him. And yeah, it's very different versions of his music. So J Babe is another one.
Oh, J
I've
Babe.
got J Babe, yeah. And then there are two more, right, that I need to throw
Yeah.
in. um hmm this is so hard. I have to like I'm like, what should I suggest for my portfolio of music? Um, I'm trying to
But
see if I
actually,
could
while you're
recommend some.
thinking,
Yeah,
but
sorry.
actually, while you're thinking, so actually, staying on the topic of the music, so I actually found this really cool series in Mumbai that is at Harkat Studios. They do this thing called a Wan Zimmer concert, WOHNZIMMER. And essentially, it's what they do is they bring an artist in, they perform a set, and they recreate the stage to kind of have that kind of homey living room kind of feeling to it. They set up a lamp, they set up some armchairs, some pillows, and everything, and it's an entirely acoustic performance. And I went and checked out their first session. Sadly, I wasn't able to check out the second and the third, but it was a brilliant idea to turn this into a series. So if you haven't heard of it, you should definitely check it out.
There are I would say there's a bunch of different like organizations that do sort of very sort
Mhm.
of stripped down living room kind of gigs. I actually know because I recently was at a conference and I got a chance to. There's an artist called Kamakshi Khanna, who, by the way, could be part of my recommendation. She's great. She's doing something, I think it's called House Concert, and you can register for it. I think they give you the location once you register or something like that. So, and that's
Ooh,
happening
I love that.
tomorrow. So you should, I'll send you the link to that. You should go check it out.
Please do,
Kamakshi
please
Khanna.
do.
She's
Kamakshi.
doing a, yeah, she's
No,
another
I
brilliant
love that.
artist.
I love those kind of things where it's kind of like because of when I was living in Chicago, there was that whole speakeasy kind of culture to it,
Mm,
and I love that whole kind of underground backdoor kind of space, and I just loved. I love that. So
yeah,
please do send me the link. I will definitely go check it out.
sure, absolutely. I'll do that.
So, coming back actually to the issues that you saw with radio in India, do you feel that the problems that are plaguing Indian radio in terms of, there's a lot of legality, there's a lot of bureaucracy, there's a lot of hoops to jump through, and only the kind of really big, powerful corporations can really get across that line to where a lot of the smaller, independent, creative people want to be? Do you feel like there is some overlap of the problems between the radio and the music scene here in India, the independent level at least?
Mm, not necessarily. I mean, with radio um, and music, I mean, it's very different in terms of like independent artists aren't not allowed to make music because of the government. Like it's not like that.
Right.
Um, I just think that there is like a huge difference in terms of, I guess, with regards to, sorry, I'm trying to find a parallel here. I'm kind of struggling. With regards to radio and its restrictions, a lot of it is mired in just the way the sort of rules are for FM radio, and that's only in relation to news and stuff, and obviously how expensive it is to actually run a station because an actual radio license costs a lot of money. With independent artists, there's no real barrier to entry. You can literally be a bedroom producer and make music and release it and stream it on any platform in the world. So I don't think that there's the same barrier for entry for an independent artist the way you would for running an FM station. So I don't think there's at least I don't see the parallel between the two there. Um, I think the only difference is that there is no real music industry except the Bollywood music industry. And that's
Right.
more to do with the giant machinery that is the film industry, where music is um, kind of like a marketing tool for films. And in
Right.
that, like there is the entire thing, the whole structure of like how royalties are paid out and copyright, that's way more structured within film music. And independent music isn't quite the same. I mean, there is a structure there, but there is some informality in there. Like, so for example, if an artist, performs a song at a venue, that venue has to like pay that money back. Like there's a whole process through IPRS and stuff. So I think it's sort of like the David and Goliath kind of story between Bollywood film music and or just film music in general, because Bollywood is very Bombay centric. This could mean it could be Telugu, it could be Tamil music industry, Kerala music industry, anything. But independent music in terms of these are artists who are making original songs that aren't going necessarily in films in the same way that they're being done by music directors for a film. So there is a bit of a difference there, and how that success sort of relates to being able to earn a decent enough amount of money so that you be able to survive as a musician. So I think that would be maybe the kind of hurdles that a lot of musicians might face, independent artists might face in India.
Right. Yeah, because I've spoken to a couple of musicians, and some of the main sort of barriers that they've always described is, of course, the big one being money, to kind of promote their music. And of course, a lot of one big, very important promotional tool that many of them have described as something like a music video, for example. And many of them kind of have this thing that I've noticed where because they're limited by budget, their ideas for what they can do in that music video also kind of is restricted. And I remember talking with a friend of mine who I work with, Keenan. He is a musician, and I remember he was driving me home one time, and we were talking about this music video that he wanted to make. He described the idea to me, and it was like basically him and his co-musician driving around. And I told him, look, as someone who has a fascination with video and videography, I can tell you right now, that idea has been done to death by so many independent artists, and I think we can do a whole lot better. And so then he was like, okay, well, why don't you tell me a cooler idea, which I pitched to him. He liked it. And then he was like, okay, well, let's try and make it. So I come to him with a budget, and then he tells me, sorry, you can only work with a third of what you're thinking. And so for me, that's kind of like another huge hurdle in the music scene, is that at least for, independent, very low level artists, the money just isn't there. And that's a huge barrier for many of them to not only get the music out, but also get it promoted to a level where they can get to those higher levels a little bit.
But I think that's there for like any artist, right? I think the thing is that the issue is that if you're an artist and you're making music, you're putting your own money into your art, right? It's
right.
You're not like it's not like a salaried job. It's not a freelance gig. No one's giving you money. You are putting the money into your art, right? And so, yeah, like it is very much that they have to like find the way to get the funds to do the things that you want to do. And it's not even a music video. It's literally even just to mix and master your music, which you would be releasing, is phenomenally expensive if you want to do it with someone who's actually really good. So yeah, it's very different from having your like a salaried job, or like, even someone who is a videographer will still be able to get a job, doing some kind of corporate video or doing something, or doing an ad video or something. So my thing is that like in this kind of space, when you are a musician, a lot of like what you'll be doing is investing in yourself, which costs a lot.
That is true. So we've talked about your time in radio. We've talked about music. So now let's get to the podcast, specifically your podcast. And so you are in charge of the Made in India podcast. And on LinkedIn, you actually describe it as and I'm quoting this here, a boutique podcasting agency. So I'm just curious, did you start Made in India as a podcast, or did you start it with the intention of turning it into an agency of some kind?
So actually, I left radio and was just pretty much freelancing. Didn't really have any sort of concrete plans to get into the podcast industry. And I actually got approached to make a podcast, and then Made in India is what came out of it. And then I was working for a podcasting company for some time. I was a creative director. And then I wanted to sort of pursue something else. I was actually planning to a music festival in like Aizawl in Mizoram. But then, of course, I had to put that on hold because, as we know, whenever there's like, elections happening, things change.
I know all too well, yes.
And so we had to like hold off on that. So I was pretty much, my show was still with the other company. And then I decided to go independent. And that's when initially just the survival of my podcast was what was the most important thing to me. And then people started asking me to make their podcasts, which was exciting. And I, thought that this is something I could do. And that's how the company came about. And what I kind of do is I kind of tailor make a lot of our solutions to what people really want. And that's how the whole idea of like becoming a production house sort of happened. And that's when I started working with creators, started working with brands and platforms and other production houses who didn't maybe understand how to make a podcast in a certain way. They would hire me to make it for them. And so we also became like a white label podcast production company. So it was something that I do really enjoy doing because I do like making podcasts. But yeah, I think that's kind of what happened. I had everything sort of like tumbled into place. And
Right.
yeah, so definitely with Made in India, that was where it kind of the inception of it. But yeah, but going independent and starting to become a production house literally happened by accident. Someone just asked me, like, you make podcasts, make my podcast. And I was like, cool, let me figure out how I can do that. So yeah, that was kind of how that happened and how I ended up becoming a production house.
Nice. And what was the first kind of so what was the name of that podcast that this person approached you to make for them?
Oh, it was Pooja Dingra. She's a pastry chef
Ah,
here. She runs Low 15 Patisserie. She WhatsApped me. Send me a WhatsApp
oh
message
wow.
saying, hey, you make podcasts? I want to make podcasts. That's me. I want to make it. Have me make mine. And
And did you
she
know her
is,
beforehand?
I did. I knew her because I used to do the afternoon request show on Radio 1. And
Ah.
during that time, because the afternoon show was a great time to kind of talk about food, and I interviewed a lot of the chefs in Bombay, and which is how I knew Pooja because Pooja just started out Love 15 at that time. And I randomly called her going, give me a recipe for something. I'm gonna put you on air in 5 seconds. And then she'd just be like, okay. And so I knew Pooja and I knew each other quite well. And so that's how we ended up working together because she knew I was in the podcast space. And I have to give her credit for being one of the first people who really invested in me and wanted to work with me. So yeah, so I still want to continue making podcasts for her because it's, when you have that person who really like has believed in you and said, you know what, you can do this and you can do it for me. Yeah, she was definitely one of those people. So she was like the first person that I ended up working with, whose podcast I ended up making.
Sounds like a very sweet relationship. No
Mm,
pun intended, of course.
yeah. Oh no, she'd murder me for that one.
But so obviously it starts with someone reaching out to you over WhatsApp and saying, "Hey, make my podcast." But now you've obviously gotten to a point where a lot more people are reaching out to you. Do you ever find yourself reaching out to organizations and saying, "Hey, you should consider making a podcast"? Has that ever been part of your business plan?
Um, it definitely has. Not so much organizations, more like people. I have
Hmm.
approached people who I thought were really cool and I wanted to make a podcast, but some people have said yes and people have said no. So some of the no people, one of who I'm currently working with on a completely other show, a gentleman called Raghu Karnad. I've been convincing him for years to make it, like, for us to make a show or for, I was like, please think of an idea and I will make it. Because Raghu is a brilliant writer, brilliant journalist, and I would love to make a podcast with him. The other was that the time that I had met Raghu, he recommended someone else. He told me that two other journalists and writers, uh, Supriya Nair and Dipanjana Pal, were
Hmm.
both doing a book show, books podcast. And so I went, and my partner Sean had checked out the show before I did and said, these guys are brilliant. We have to do the show. I don't care how, but we got to do the show. And I heard their podcast and it was so good. And it was a random link on SoundCloud or something. And then we made the Lit Pickers, which is one of the shows that we've sort of, invested in because we really believe in it. And so,
Right.
yes, we definitely approached people that we really thought were going to make a great show to make it with them. And so that's one of them. I wish I had the chance to do more of that. The only issue is that and I'm not a funded company. I don't have like lots of money. And so these things do take, I mean, it is whatever money that I like, that isn't just what my company earns, but that whatever I earn, because thankfully, as a host and a consultant, I do get money. And so I take that money and I put that money into the things that I believe in and I really want to do. So that for me is the way I do it. But yeah, I don't have none of that VC money that you can just throw around anywhere. I just have little me with my little company. And so the things that I try to put, I mean, that allows me the freedom to be able to do some of the creative stuff that I want to do. But yeah, it has its limitations.
And speaking of actually, because I was gonna ask, what the growth has been like at the Made in India podcasting agencies, but that actually, what you said about the, not having VC money, it actually led me to a different question, which is, are you considering going for funding at any point in the future?
I have, like, I definitely did, like, way, way before the lockdown happened. It was something that I was considering for sure. Now it's, so my sort of path here is that I'm not really interested in sort of building a huge network of like shows. Like, that's not really my path. The thing that I'm really excited about is that I want to do a certain number of shows every day, every year, and them to be really good. And I want to do sort of big marquee kind of shows. And that's the kind of stuff that I want to either invest in or to do or to work on. And those marquee shows will have like big marketing budgets. They'll have big, so like that's the idea that I want to sort of pursue and continue to do. And that's sort of me because I very focused around like what I want to make and the fact that it should be a good quality show. That's in terms of just the way it's recorded and how it's done and the quality of the storytelling and the, that kind of thing. So that's what I want to focus on. The thing that I'm figuring out right now is that yes, getting that big VC money seems like if you have to do it, you have to like go whole hog and do it. The thing is that the one thing that I have right now with me, with my own, like a company that I fully and completely, and me and my partner fully and completely own, is that I am only answerable to him and I, right? And
Right.
I don't have a sort of a bunch of board members that I am answerable to in a way where if I do a show that might not be the most successful show in terms of it hasn't brought those kind of returns on investment, that I am not going to lose out. So I can put, some money into something that I really believe in because it's something that I feel like brings value, even if it's value to 100 people and not a million. And so my thing is like that's kind of where I'm at. It is something that I'm trying to figure out of like what are the ways in which I can get funding or funded for the things that I want to do, but not necessarily completely give up equity or creative freedom, which is what I love.
Of course. No, it's like that's always kind of the tightrope act. I feel a lot of the companies going for VC funding have to figure out.
Which is why
All
I haven't,
right.
it's been 3 years. I have
Oh wow.
not stepped into a single room with a funder. I've had, by the way, wonderful people in my life. I've literally had a friend who barely knew me for 6 months, but loved what we were doing and loved me and like what I had built. We were in Dulali and Kad. He walked in, he put his backpack down, pulled out a checkbook, wrote me a check, and said, I don't care what you do with this. I know you're going to do something amazing. Take it. And gave me a check for 10 lakhs. And and so it's not like I've never had anyone believe in me. I, of
Right.
course, thanked him because there was no way that she could use that without having to pay a ridiculous amount of tax. So I took it, and I will forever remember the most beautiful gesture from someone that, like I said, barely knew me, but really believed in me. And I did give it back to him and tell him that, like, thank you so much for believing in me. I don't think I can take this in this way at this time. But it's not
Right.
like I haven't had people really believe in what I'm doing and know that, like, if they were to, like I said, he was just ready to just, like, here, take this. Because I don't care I don't care what you do. I just know you'll do something amazing. And that is a beautiful thing. That is like one of the
Exactly.
most beautiful things. Like, it was such a beautiful moment for me. I was nearly in tears. I was like, oh my God. It was so beautiful. I've never like, I mean, for me, there is this, we live in a world where profit is so important, rather than creative endeavor or, positive change. So like a
Right.
lot of like, what people's priorities are. I feel like sometimes I don't know if I completely agree with that's the way that I want to do things. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I wish I had friends like that who would come in and just put down a check for 10 lakhs on
I know.
my project.
I couldn't already, like my partner was just like, listen, the tax implications for this is going to be too much. Please return the check. And I was like, when the accountant comes in, when the I was like, I'd love to just take this money, but we live in a tax regime that might not allow me to just take money like that.
Yes, sadly, that is the world we live in.
You know.
Okay, May, final question. So we've obviously talked about your time in the UK, your time in radio, your time in, covering music, and your time as a podcaster. And obviously, you're talking about how, we live in a world where the need for immediate returns, the need for, being successful over the creative endeavors is sort of more important. And obviously, we've had so many calls here at manicpod where,
I still think creative endeavors can be successful. I
oh,
just
absolutely,
I'm
absolutely.
talking more about profiteering.
Absolutely. No, I agree. Because we've had so many calls where people, reach out to us and they say, we're looking to make a podcast, but before anything else, I want to know, what can you offer me in terms of monetization? What can you offer me in terms of, will you pay me to make the podcast? So what is really tragic, in the kind of almost 2.5 to 3 years that I've been working here is that so many people come to us and the first thing on their mind is always money. And look, I get it. Obviously you need money to run a podcast and you need money to run a company that makes podcasts. But it's almost like a lot of these people, I'm trying to think of the best way to put it. They want to be able to quit their jobs and do podcasting full time. And that's kind of like what I think is the general kind of thing of, they see people on YouTube or they see people on, all these other platforms. They think, I want to be able to do that. I want to be able to quit my day job and just do this full time, and sit at home and sit in front of a camera and record and just make money and just make, lakhs and lakhs and lakhs and be able to pay my rent. And
Yeah,
sadly,
but then
it's
that's the thing, right? Like even most, I mean, that's another thing, which is that if you want to be able to do any kind of, you know, whether it's and podcasting isn't just the only thing. It's like whether you want to make a podcast or start a YouTube channel, whatever that may be, you have to put some money into it. It's just like what we were talking about
exactly,
musicians, right? You have to put
yeah,
money into it and figure out a way to build the community around your show and build an audience and talk about whatever it is that you want to do for your show. And then my thing is that like there is a lot of investment, and that includes money and your own personal time and patience and effort that goes into this before even you can see 1 rupee. So
yeah.
to think that like magically I'll have the most successful podcast the moment my voice goes on the mic, balls.
And it's like, yeah, it's like a lot of these people, they're like, many of them are business podcasts. So everybody comes in and they're like, I want to do a business podcast. And I have this great idea. Just wait until you hear it. All these business leaders that are there, I want to interview them, top of the top, cream of the crop. These are the people I want to bring on my show. And it'll be such a cool idea. And I'm just sitting there listening to them on the phone going, we have like a show like that already. There's like 50 shows like that already exist. So,
No.
and so
I've
that,
heard that more, like the fact that it's just literally bringing so much trauma to my brain because literally that's 50% of the shows is like, let's talk to entrepreneurs and the most successful company people. And I'm like, is this the only show people want to make? Forget people want to listen to. This is like the only show that people want to make. I'm like, why can't we have, far more nuanced conversations or do something a little different? And yeah, this is where I feel like there is just like this one idea of what is the podcast that you can make rather than thinking about what are the kind of completely different things that you can do. And, and again, my thing is that I get it. Like a lot of these, a lot of companies and a lot of people who are in this sort of space of business, I get, that there are things that you want to create and want to do, but I just feel like there are better ways of doing it. And I don't
Exactly.
know. It's like, this is the easy. Let's just interview all the big successful business people. That's what we should do. Ask them how they did it. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, it's honestly it does. You try to be as patient as you can, but it does get to you after a while.
No, it
But
does. My hope is that
yeah,
like I try to see, I mean, there are people that I feel like do something a little differently, or maybe because I always say like specificity is key. Like even if you want to do that, is there a way you can do that that is like just different from everyone else? Like, are you
exactly.
asking them something like super specific? Are you asking them something that like no one else is asking them? Or are you looking at something that they have done in a particular way? Like, I just, yeah, it's, I don't know. Like, I always feel like I have to like take them outside the box and be like, let's do something different. But it's really hard to convince people when they're like really,
Exactly.
beeline towards that idea. And I'm like, okay, fine. What else to
Yeah, it's
say?
like I feel like it's less the idea and more like that idea is kind of like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow kind of thing.
Mm,
And they're just
yeah.
like, that's what I'm looking for. It's forget the rainbow, forget this beautiful thing. It's the pot of gold that I'm looking for. That's the
Yeah.
thing I want. And it's just,
I
yeah.
don't know
But I
why.
want to, but
Mm.
I want to ask a final question, which is, what advice would you give to people who look at the journey that you have had and want to, I guess, walk the same path that you have? Many people might say, "Oh, but I don't have a background in radio," or, "How do I get into covering music?" or "How do I start my own podcasting agency?" What advice would you give to them?
Mm, I mean, for anyone who's never been on the radio or never made a podcast before or once, I would just say make a podcast, firstly. Like the first thing you should do is actually make one. Like when I first like took my show independent, I basically literally Googled recording studios in Bombay, and I created Excel sheet, my best friend. I wrote down all of the studio names I could find across Bombay that was like from Andheri all the way to like Lower Parel, because I ain't going anywhere beyond that. And then found like a bunch of studios, called all of them, booked time with them, recce'd them, and I like basically like created this like database of studios. So that was like the first thing that I did, right? Because I was making a music show, I needed to be able to work with a studio that could record a drum kit. How many studios can record a drum kit that have mics to record a drum kit? Like all that kind of thing. It was like a setup that I just knew. The moment I said, "Can you record a drum kit here?" They said no. I'm like, okay, bye. Because most studios in Bombay are either dubbing studios or
Right.
you're recording like, or they ad studios. And they're like the handful of them that like record music or can record music well or are equipped to record music. So that was me because I was starting my own. My podcast was like a music. I was recording actual music. So for me, like that was how I started. Like figure out a way in which how you can record your show. Like find out like that Google is your best friend, and so is YouTube. You can make everything from learning how to make a podcast to learning how to make paneer burji like on YouTube. So like it's a wonderful place, and you can find out ways in which to find the best ways to record your show, find the right mics, find the right. It's like there is so much information. You don't even need my help. There is absolutely a plethora of information that's out there, and like I said, it's just having to like load yourself with all that information, talk to the right people, for example, people can talk to you, people can talk to me to figure out like, okay, what would work? Where do I start? I have this idea. I don't know where to go. So it's all of that. Like, I feel like it's not like I knew which were the best mics to use, but I had a lot of like audio engineer friends. So I was just like,
Right.
listen, if I'm going to record, like, what do I usually do? And so I knew that like there were certain ways in which like, okay, these are good like vocal mics, and these are really good if I'm recording like outside in the middle of like a very crowded street. So I had to also figure all that stuff out by talking to people. So I would say that like if you really want to do this, and also one massive piece of advice, and I'm sure you will agree with me on this, is like one of the things I've realized when I ask people why they want to get into podcasting, and they're like, oh, I just think it's a new medium and I want to do it. And I ask them, tell me a podcast that you've heard. And most of them have not heard a podcast or heard anything. And so I'm like, if you want to become a filmmaker, you have at least have had to watch 100 films. right? And most people who are making podcasts have barely even heard 5 podcasts, one podcast, 2 podcasts. So I'm like, go listen to lots and lots and lots of podcasts. Right? Listen to the first 10 like most popular podcasts in the world. Like just start listening to shows. And then you will start to realize that there are so many different ways in which you can create your show and different formats and different ideas for sound design and different ways to have conversations. So my thing is that like when people want to make a podcast, they haven't even heard enough podcasts to be able to like actually understand what it takes to actually make one, right? They don't even know what they sound like. It's like I said, if you're going to be a filmmaker, you're going to watch a ton of films, right? You're not going to become,
Exactly.
no one's a filmmaker and said, I've never seen a movie, but I want to make films. I
I
know
mean,
so
yeah,
many people in the podcast space have said that to me. I haven't actually heard a podcast, but I want to make one. I'm like, okay.
mm,
So I'm telling you, you know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm
oh
talking
yeah,
about.
I do. Big time. And it's like, and not only that, whenever I speak to some people, they're all just like, they give me the same kind of 5 names. They're like, I've listened to the Joe Rogan podcast. I've listened to, and it's just like, there's so much overlap between what people are listening to. And it's just like that. And it kind of translates into the fact that everybody's kind of coming to you and pitching the same exact idea over and over again and thinking that they're inventing some new way of doing it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, that's honestly. And then we have a question here from Keenan. He says a lot of podcast. Yeah, we did actually cover this. He's asking if there's any scope for monetization in India. Personally, I think we're still a little ways away from achieving that. But I'd like to hear what you think on that.
Um, I firstly have to say that like I don't think we're in a space where people aren't making money from podcasts. Definitely, if you had to ask me, are people making money from making podcasts? Yes, they are. And they're making money in different ways. When you're talking about monetization of your show, yes, I've monetized my podcast too. But everyone's doing it in different ways. Some people are just doing sort of flat out just inventory in their shows. I'm someone that likes to make it a little more because again, my show is very precious to me. If I'm going to have an association with a brand, I want it to really work. I want it to be where I have a chance to do an integration that not only just works for me creatively, but also works for the brand as being something that's has far more depth than just like randomly plugging an ad. I mean, that's the
Right.
wonderful thing about a podcast that you have that kind of chance to do those kind of things. So I would say that there are people who are making money from their podcasts. I think where we have a long way to go is that there aren't enough brands that understand the return or the kind of that understand the medium of podcasting well enough to kind of comprehend what their investment in a show would give them. So I think
Exactly.
that's the gap more
Hmm.
than anything else. I also think that with regards to people who are making podcasts, the most important thing for you is not when the hell am I going to make money? It's like, how can I build a loyal community of people that the moment because like I decide to monetize that because that's what anyone in the if you're working in the media industry, you are selling your audience. That's what newspapers do, that's what TV does, that's what everyone does, right? So you're
Yeah.
selling. It's why when TV is saying that we have these many people watching, so when your ad plays at this time on Big Boss, you are getting this many views. That's how it is. It's the same. So any media is monetizing their audience, right? Why is an ad coming up? An ad's coming up to advertise to you, right? Because you're watching TV or you're listening to the radio. It's the same
Exactly.
with podcasting. If you have like 10 people listening to you, right? But those 10 people are like Ratan Tata and Godrej G, then like maybe Mercedes might want to advertise on your show because they're like, wow, this guy has some big people listening to his show. So my thing
Right.
is that you have to first see number one, build a loyal audience and also understand your audience really well. Like I have done little things here and there where we've sort of tried to play with our audience, right? We
Okay.
made like Made in India, like this is when the lockdown happened, my partner had this idea to create an Instagram filter. So we created an Instagram filter.
Oh, wow.
We had a merch store. I mean, it didn't make us that much money, but it was a great marketing tool. It was like, whenever I walked into a music festival and literally seen people wearing a Made in India t-shirt, and I'm like, that's my people. That's my people right there. So this is what I'm saying, that you have to try to find ways to give back to your audience and build the community and build that loyalty. So I think that's really, really important. And I think you have to build all of that before even you think about making money. Because if you don't have all of that, where are you going to get the money from? How are you going to convince someone to pay for the thing, pay for your show? How are you going to convince them that, hey, you should advertise on my show because I have this amazing audience and they listen to me and they trust me? And if you tell, like, if you advertise, I can convince them to buy your chaddis, whatever it is that you want, what you want me to like sell. So my thing is that that's what you're doing. So
Right.
that's where like you have to realize that like that's what you're trying to sell. So monetization, when people think about monetization, they just think, oh, why is the ad money not coming in? I'm like, the ad money is not coming in because you barely have 50 people listening every month. So then build that
Exactly.
community, build that loyalty. So that's what I'm saying. Like, this is the thing that like people are not realizing, that like if you are able to get to that stage where you have an audience, you can actually sell to a brand who actually understand what you're doing or believe in what you're doing, or say, hey, you know what? If I advertise on that show, these many people will come to my website. These many people will buy my products, that kind of thing. So that's where it's the same reason for how do you think Instagrammers make money? Instagram influencers make money. They have some like 1 lakh people who follow them, and then yeah, and they're like, okay, let us advertise. You please sell our lipstick. Please do this. Please do that. So my only thing is that like this is where when you consider monetization, like no influencer is making money from 100 people following them. They're making
Yeah.
money because lakhs of people are following them. So I don't see what this people are not realizing. It's the same with YouTube. The moment you like get these many people and these many subscribers and these many people like watching your YouTube video, that's when you start making money. So when we're talking about their infrastructures exist, my thing is that make the numbers, or make people understand that the audience that you have is loyal, that they understand you, that they believe in you. So like that's my thing. Like, so before even you think about, everyone wants to think about like, when am I going to make money? No one's realizing that I have to actually make effort to make a great show or have an audience that are actually interested in what I have to say.
Exactly. And yeah, I feel
Sorry,
like a
that
lot of
was a
people.
massive rant. I do apologize.
No, 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 no. Please, please. We love it when that
Very
happens.
bugging.
And a lot of great knowledge being shared. But yeah, it's like people feel kind of like almost like, and I'm loath to use him as a reference, but like people almost are like Donald Trump in a way, in that they come and they're like, the
Not
building is
everyone.
there. I'm just gonna slap my name on it, and suddenly it'll be this whole new amazing thing that people are just gonna want to run to, and it's just it's yeah. And
Yeah.
Keenan has just, I think, popped up with another question where he's like, so on manicpod we have this thing called micro podcasts,
Mm.
which are 3 minute audio bursts that you can record on our app. And he's basically asking, do you have any hacks that you could suggest to kind of try and build that audience? And do you think that short form audio is becoming more popular in the Indian podcasting space?
I will say that I'm sorry, I don't have hacks. That's just not me. You got to put
That
the work in, Keenan. God damn it.
Yeah, you know what?
But I
I'm going to just I'm going to pop some champagne for you telling him that. I'm just gonna go celebrate once this thing is
someone
over.
asked me, are there any hacks to like making? I was like, no, there's no hack. You just have to work really hard and do it. Every person had to work hard at some point. So all I'm saying is that I don't think there's a hack. I do think that the thing that I really enjoy, which is where like when we talk about building an audience, is that I know that when I'm having fun or when I'm enjoying myself or I'm enjoying what I'm doing or I believe truly in what I'm doing, then I feel like the people who are on the other side of the mic also will get it. I think this may not be a hack, but the moment that someone realizes that you're not being authentic to yourself, or you're not doing you, or you're selling me something, people are extremely discerning. They can absolutely tell you're selling them something. It's so obvious. And so my thing is that, like, when you are, I would say, like, have fun with it, right? Like, we had actually worked with this brand. It was just like a very short campaign, but I don't know if you've heard of Mubi, like MUBI, this like
Yes,
streaming platform.
yes,
They wanted
I
to,
am a subscriber to
yeah.
that
So
platform.
they had like wanted to advertise with us because they felt that there was an overlap, like indie music, indie films, and I'm like,
There you go.
yeah, totally. And so we did this like really fun campaign because I didn't want to just be like, so we said that let's do something where we're actually recommending a film, because that's so my jam. Like, because I'm
Right.
recommending music. I'm literally like, this is a music discovery show. Let's do it where you're discovering like a cool film to watch. And so that was one of the things that we did. And they gave us their entire listing of like what films were coming out that month. And then we got a chance to recommend a film. And then we would do it in this really fun way because, again, I love to be creative. And so in the middle of the show, my engineer would like interrupt me. Like, you know how you push the fader up and you're like, hey, listen, I
Yeah.
think we're going to have to stop the show for 2 minutes. And he has a cat called Timon. So he was like, Timon needs his cuddles. So I got to go take a break. And so it was like this really sweet way. So you can literally hear Timon like purring in the background. And he's like,
Oh,
listen, Timon needs his cuddles. So I think we can take a break now. And then using that, like having a little fun with it. And then I would be, hey, since you have a break right now, you know I love recommending music. You know what else I'd like to recommend? I'm going to recommend this film and movie and blah. And so I'm still doing something that is in the vein of what I would normally do, instead of like selling, I don't know, like Ambuja cement or something, you know, like how the hell do I do that on a podcast? And not that Ambuja is ever going to advertise on a Made in India. But if they do, please let me know. You can call me. I'll find a way.
you find
I
and
will.
actually
Brand integration is very important. Huh? But
and
I
actually
will.
someone
Like,
just commented.
say
It's
what?
amazing how Trump and hacks came up in the conversation in the span of a minute. Someone actually
See?
commented, man.
But like, yeah, if Ambuja Cement come to me and they want to advertise on Made in India, I promise you I'll make it happen. But I
Yeah,
think I do think that short form content. See, I have to be honest. I listen to like every sort of, like length of show, and I feel like honestly it depends on where I am and what I'm doing. So one of the things is that like I usually listen to shows that are between 20 minutes to an hour. Like that's my usual listening. But I do listen to short form um, podcasts as well, which are shows like Indicator by Planet Money, or which are like under 10 minutes or under 5 minutes. I think that it's really fun to listen to stuff that's shorter, but I still listen to like a bunch of them back to back. I
right,
don't, but I mean, I might not be I might be um, I think there's like a term for this that they use in, I don't know if it's like Nielsen or Edison research, but there are like new listeners and veteran listeners. I would consider myself
right.
like a veteran listener because I've been listening for longer and I'm like deeply invested in the medium. So I am like a slightly different listener, but I do think that a lot of new listeners listen to shorter form stuff. Though, again, I think that once you're in it, you start to listen. Your time that you spend listening to a podcast absolutely grows. So I do think, and I've done the shorter format stuff with some of our podcasts, and people have been very upset, and they're just like, "Why are this so short? Please give us the longer stuff." So yeah, so I don't think it. I do think it works, but I do also think that people will listen to longer stuff, especially like people who do like listening to podcasts, because people are usually listening when they're, making their cup of coffee in the morning, or they're going for a jog or going for a walk or whatever it is. I think usually people are doing it, or when they're driving. No one drives for 3 minutes. So that's
Yeah,
the thing. So that's why I feel like when people are listening, we're listening at these times. So which is why you
right.
need something a little longer. But I don't. I really do. I am very curious about shorter format stuff. I just want to be able to do something that's kind of like different and interesting. So I think
Of
that
course.
if you're doing shorter format, like do it in a way that you feel like you're getting the most out of it, I think. Yeah.
Uh, so honestly, May, this was such a treat to listen to. Um, and
No, Keenan, you can't join. Uh, I also have a life. Okay, I can't be on this thing for like 2 hours and all. Okay,
honestly,
Vedant asked me first. Okay, bye.
that was that just made my week. What an end to the week. That is the best way to end it. Thank
Hey,
you
but
so much,
I'll
Meg.
totally come. See, I'm
Yes,
obsessed with
standing
studios.
invitation.
I need to come to your Chembur studio. I have some very dear friends who live in Chembur who always ask me to come, and I'll definitely come down to your studio because, like I said, I live my life in studios. I live most of my life in studios. I love studios, so I definitely want to come and check out your studio. So I'm super curious.
Please, please. So yeah, our studio is we made it tailor made for podcasts. So,
Nice.
and we've also done, Keenan specifically has had a few jam sessions in here, so it can handle music as well. And
Okay.
the funny thing is I never expected this to happen, because I thought every studio would have this, but apparently it's not the case. Our biggest selling point is that our air conditioner that's sitting in here, we can actually turn it to silent mode, and that's like when people see that, they're just like, "Whoa, when did that happen? When
You
when did
mean
it?" Like
they
we can
don't?
actually make it like super quiet, like so quiet that you can hear the silence. Like we can still have the AC on while it is, but
It's
it is you can't hear any sound.
I'm telling you, man, no one gets this stuff. But then it's really hard. But it's great that you're doing that because it's the worst when you have to sit in a studio and there's no AC and then you're just sweating buckets.
I
And
know.
I feel like I feel like the sweating is palpable. I feel like people, I'll be like, guys, it is a little hot because I love ACs as well.
Oh yes, this AC has been a godsend. The fact that it's so quiet and the fact that it still keeps you cool is the best part. But May, it's been an absolute treat having you. Thank you so much for giving your time for this show. And I know we went very much over time. I know I said only like 30 minutes, and it's been over
That's
an
okay.
hour now. But it's yeah. I mean, honestly, the fact that we went through so much, and you were such a joy to listen to. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Well, it's really nice to meet you, Vedant, and hopefully we'll meet each other in real life.
Yes, yes. Please let me know when you'll be coming down. We would love to have you, give you the
Thank
studio
you.
tour. We're so excited
See,
for
listen,
when you
there's
come.
one thing that every studio like gets judged on. How good is your chai? That is what I
Ah,
want.
so here's the thing.
Coffee,
We
okay,
have judge,
whichever.
but
Yeah, okay.
I'm the coffee guy at the office, and
Okay,
I
that's
can
fine.
tell you, I can vouch for myself that I make excellent coffee.
Done.
We have we have two French presses in the office and one V60. So coffee, you're set. And we
Okay.
have a small can of condensed milk, like Malai condensed milk in the fridge that we use as sweetener.
You're like the first place I'm like, Malay condensed milk is using? Very stylish. Mm.
I mean, it's effective. It works for,
It's
and
good.
yeah, absolutely.
Yum.
Yeah.
Good things.
Definitely can't wait to have you. Thank you
Yay.
so much. All right. Bye. Have a
Bye.
good have a good night.